Welcome to the HCI family of podcasts. We're your source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development. We share our own original research, explore industry trends, and interview executives and thought leaders from across the globe. Join us for practitioner-oriented content around all things leadership, HR, talent management, organizational development, and change management. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with the HCI family of podcasts. James Ricci, welcome to the conversation today.
Great to be here.
It's a pleasure to be with you. You're joining us from Canada. I'm south of Salt Lake City in Utah. Montreal, I believe you said. It's a pleasure to have a chance to sit down and talk with you about the future of sustainable personal mobility and how tech is changing how we get around. Another aspect of the conversation today that I think we'll touch on is also family-run businesses and how those evolve. And the challenges and opportunities that we have, with family-run and legacy
Absolutely.
businesses. So I think this will just be a really fun conversation. As we get started, I wanted to share James' bio with everybody. James Ricci is president of the Roy Foss Automotive Group and founder of Landline e-bikes. He has 15 plus years of automotive industry experience and was named Automotive News 40 Under 40. James, anything else you would like to highlight by way of your background before we dive on in?
I grew up, my grandfather started our business in 1962. We're a 60-plus-year-old, three-generation family business. And I'd be lying if I told you that I had any goals earlier in my life of actually joining our family business. Through a roundabout series of circumstances, I graduated, postgraduate, got my master's, and found myself a couple months later selling used cars. So it was a pretty drastic shift. So, today we're excited about our future, where we're at today. And in addition to, thinking deeply about where the future of mobility is going, I'm also passionate about, leadership within the context of legacy businesses. So that's pretty much it.
Yeah, well, that's excellent. And I'll say too, just from the outset, I'm a university professor. I think the audience, people who tend to tune in on a regular basis know that. So that's my main gig, but I've always done consulting work. And I've done a decent amount of consulting, lots of tech startups and, kind of traditional larger corporations and such. I've done a number of consulting projects over the years with rapidly scaling family-run businesses. And it's been fascinating to me. So you'll have like multi-generational family-run businesses that at one point or another, they decide either the family group decides it's time for us to grow and scale, or maybe they bring on some outside capital group or somebody, and then they get that pressure to then grow and scale. And it is interesting, to say the least, as you make that transition or attempt to make that transition, and what it looks like to scale. Especially scaling is always hard, but especially within a legacy organization within a family-run business, it's challenging. So I think everything that we're going to be talking about today is going to be couched within that context of this kind of an organizational setting and dynamic, which I find fascinating. Okay, let's go ahead and dive on in and talk a little bit more about, with your experience in the automotive industry and with sustainable transportation, what have you seen over, say, the last 10 years as some of the biggest trends? And then we can start to get into like what we're doing now to lean into these opportunities in a meaningful way.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's been a lot of change, especially in this kind of post-COVID realm of the past few years. The way that I look at it is there's really what I would call four major trends that we're observing. The first trend is electrification, or perhaps more accurately, a shift towards more sustainable alternatives to the traditional combustion engine. So really a shift towards zero emissions. The second is the emergence of autonomous tech. Now that comes in the form of self-driving capabilities. In General Motors product, it's called Super Cruise, for example, where you can have hands-free driving on freeways, or in Canada, we call them highways. And the next kind of trend that we're seeing is connected vehicles. So, we're seeing a shift from vehicles, cars and trucks having, this on in-vehicle dashboard and electronics modules being an afterthought to a shift where it really is a computer on wheels. And a lot of the value, in addition to getting from A to B, will be unlocked in how the vehicles connect with each other on the road from a safety perspective, how they connect to the other devices that make our lives valuable. And there's a whole host of interesting thoughts around the future where you could leave your car in your driveway and overnight through an over-the-air update, you get new features that you didn't have the day before. So
Yeah.
that's really connected vehicles, and that's really interesting. And then I think the last major trend is a shift, just a general shift. We talk about software eats up most industries, but a shift to the convenience economy. And what I mean by that is the Amazonification of the car business. And we saw, especially during COVID, a lot of dealer groups trying to pivot towards an online sales model out of necessity, so selling vehicles online, and by and large, limited success for a variety of different reasons. But what we are unequivocally seeing right now is a shift maybe more to omni-channel. So
Hmm.
better online experience that speaks more to the in-store experience and better sharing of information between those flows so our customers have a more connected experience. So electrification, autonomous tech, connected vehicles, and the convenience economy. Those are the major trends that we're tracking, in our business.
Yeah, super interesting. And I'll just also add, so my own personal experience, in this space, not professionally, but as a
Yeah,
consumer. We drive two electric vehicles. We have a third hybrid family vehicle. I have an electric scooter. I have an electric bike. So like for the last decade or so, we that's been the space we've been in, and
yeah,
we've kind of leaned into that as a family. And we decided, we have solar panels on the house. We're going to try to
yeah,
go fully electric for our transportation, et cetera. And I've definitely seen massive improvements in the technology over that time. And in fact, our one of our electric vehicles is getting old. Like it's a 2012, so it's 12 years
which
old.
model?
It's a 2012 Nissan Leaf, and
Okay.
lots of people are like, how is that? It's not a brick at this point. And I'm like, nah, the battery life has actually been pretty
Yeah,
good. Like it's
yeah,
it's it's diminished a little bit, but we're in pretty good shape. Anyways, but they're way better now. Like
yeah,
not just the Leaf is way better, but like so many different brands are just so much
absolutely.
better now. So many new features now. All of that's wonderful. Um, and then part of our family dialogue is, okay, what do we do with this car that it's getting older, it's kind of past its normal lifespan that most people would consider for an electric vehicle,
Yeah.
et cetera, and like what are we going to do next, et cetera. We're having those conversations, but just as a kind of an observer and as a consumer, I've been noticing some of those trends that you just mentioned, and we've kind of felt it too, as a family utilizing those types of vehicles.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, depending on where you are, there are different adoption curves. And one of the things that stands out to me right now, even in the kind of highest rates of adoption. So if we look at Canada in general, last year, about 10% of total new retail sales were EVs or some combination of, really plug-in hybrid or fully electric vehicles. And the fact is that we've seen growth start to slow a little bit. And
Yeah.
what's interesting is that, in the traditional cycles of innovation, you have your early adopters. We're shifting into the early majority. And what we're seeing is an interesting shift as a lot of the manufacturers, of course, there's the traditional things, which are making sure we have great range in the new offerings that are out, making sure that the infrastructure of charging stations and uptime is great so that people have confidence that if they're going on a road trip, that they can find, a solution for themselves. But I think that part of what's changing right now is I think a lot of people are realizing these aren't spaceships,
Yeah.
and at their vehicles, and they've got a different drivetrain and different form of, of being powered. But we need to speak the language of people that are looking at it from, a more practical lens, not through the excitement of, hey, this is the newest, coolest, gadget. But yeah, so I think the industry is reconciling that right now, in addition to making sure that, the price point is at an affordable level where it's accessible and the total, cost of ownership makes sense for the average folks that need a car.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll just, again, my own personal experience.
Yeah,
There are a wide range of different types of electric vehicles,
absolutely.
different price points. Our entry point was the Nissan Leaf. That's on the lower end, right, of the
Yeah,
price point. But it's been great for us, and over time, we've explored other options as well. Um, but whatever your price point is, whatever, if you're thinking about trying to get into the space and try out an electric vehicle or a hybrid vehicle, I will say they're I think they're more reasonable now price wise than they have been before. There's lots of competition, lots of pressure on the price to keep it, within a reasonable range, especially in comparison to other vehicles. Cars generally are super expensive,
yeah,
so
yeah,
that's a hard thing. But I think there's some really great electric options that are out there.
yeah.
Um, what do you see as like as you're now moving forward? You have this family run business, multi-generational. Um, you're moving like this kind of new world of sustainable business, sustainable. I mean, the e-bike, your e-bike business. I mean, that's all about sustainability and personal mobility. What do you see as like your approach moving into the future to lean into this and to leverage this in a productive way?
Well, I think when I think about this, when our team thinks about it, I think there's a tendency to either think too long term or a tendency to think too short term. And let me
Hmm.
explain a little bit. I think on the short term perspective, a lot of businesses, if you study legacy businesses, if you study kind of tenured, um, great history businesses, whether it's Kodak. Kodak is often used as one of the greatest examples of a company that had the technology in the digital camera space before Apple did. And their focus, and arguably from the perspective of the board of directors of Kodak at the time, their perspective was, hey, listen, we're making so much money on this uh, photograph production business. Our margins are high. Why would we compete against ourselves and invest and really contribute to our future demise? And so I think there's a tendency with legacy businesses. On the one hand, we have to stay in business today. We have to make sure that we're generating positive cash flows, because I think a lot of people get swept up into mass hysteria of investing in the newest trend or investing in, whatever is getting a lot of attention, to the neglect of, hey, listen, we still have this core business of, ICE vehicles that need to be sold, and we've got customers that have that as a preference. And yet at the same time, we have to think about, okay, well, what are the next 5, 10, 15 years? What are some of the possibilities? And so, for example, our investment and my starting of Landline was, post COVID, this huge surge in micromobility, e-bikes and smaller forms of, smaller than cars. We saw a great opportunity to say, hey, listen, we know the mobility space, we don't really know this other space, but let's take a bet on this. It's not going to be existential, but it's going to get us into a new part of the business, and it's going to allow us to put some resources to an idea of what could take off. And so that's kind of how we're approaching it. There's a lot of different trends and opportunities that we're interested in. For example, on the alternatives, traditionally when you buy a vehicle, you either buy it or you finance it or you lease
Hmm.
it. There's an emerging trend of subscription or fractional ownership. And so we're
Hmm.
looking at different ways, just in talks with 3 different companies that we could either collaborate with or partner with or invest in. So we're very much of this opinion, focus on being exceptional on the core today, but we need to be putting time towards thinking about, okay, are there businesses that we could collaborate with? Who's running this? Like being dialed into where the industry is going. And so that's constantly a juggling act. I think the other challenge we have to figure out is not pursuing too many different things.
Mm,
So
yeah.
being creative and being willing to risk things. Jim Collins, the writer, talks about the undisciplined pursuit of more. And I often, it resonates for me because a lot of times we'll just throw a number of things at the wall, but not be focused around a strategy. And that's where I think we on the one hand, we get scared and we overcome, or we have to deal with what, the innovators love of staying in our zone and saying a few years later who moved our cheese versus the opposite of trying too many different things and being so unfocused. So those are the things that we're at a high level thinking about in our business.
Something else I'm wondering about, just because I've been seeing more coverage in the news, in the media around charging stations and like the infrastructure. And there's, excuse me, there's been some efforts from the current in the U.S. at least in the current administration to support the development of that infrastructure across the nation. Um, but on the other hand, my understanding is there's kind of three major players when it comes to like the charging stations, and one of them just proclaimed like they're kind of getting out of that. They're not going to be focusing on it as much. Tesla, and there are a lot of people with a lot of Teslas who are now wondering, scratching their head a little bit, what's this going to look like as we move into the future. Any thoughts on that? Because like you said, if you're going on a road trip, you want to at least have a sense that you're going to have access to recharging.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that?
I have a number of thoughts. I mean, I think that still for most people, um, you know, I think that there's a couple of things. I think that as Tesla mentions that they're shifting away from that part of the business, I think there's been a really important development, which has been the development of the North American charging standard. So
Hmm.
all the manufacturers in North America are going to be aligning effectively to use the standard that Tesla uses. And that's a really important and not subtle thing because there will be a rollout and it will take time and we'll have adapters to shift to and then eventually shift to the native charging outlets for all vehicles going forward. That's important because what I think we need is interoperability for
Mm.
all the different charging stations. There's still significant investment and excitement in the infrastructure, and so I don't view that necessarily as any sign that in fact, I mean, Tesla continues to grow share. The percentage of vehicles sold that are EV or at
Yeah.
least partly EV continues to increase, especially in certain areas. So this will continue to be an infrastructure discussion for many years ahead. I think combine that with the need for in-home charging for multi-unit dwellers as well. So not just single detached homes, but in condo buildings and apartments. And I think the real answer to your question, because charging stations will continue to the network will continue to grow. The real answer to your question, I think, is getting battery technology to a point where we have access to chargers where the time to find a charging station and to refuel is comparable to what it is to refuel your vehicle, your gas powered vehicle. And I think that we're getting very close to that. There's many different, other businesses that are looking at battery swap technology as well. But I actually don't think with, high speed charging that we're that far away from that reality. So that's where, I think that combination of one standards, access to, where somebody on a GM vehicle has access to the Tesla charger and it's seamless and you've got an app that's native to your, the manufacturer or the brand of the vehicle that you have, where you can see, and have confidence that this charger is available, the uptime, is going to be there. I think that we're on the brink of that, and that mixed with battery tech that it allows us to charge faster is really going to help with adoption going forward.
Yeah. Well, that is super cool. I'm excited for that. And I'm excited for what the future holds personally as a consumer, but also, as I just look at the business case of all of this, and in the environmental case, it's just super fascinating, multi-pronged kind of benefits, I think, of how we do this. As we start to wrap up, any final thoughts around your particular challenges and opportunities as they relate back to, being a multi-generational family-run business, and a legacy business?
I think my final, maybe one of the, questions that we're thinking about, and it's specifically as, a family run operation, but it could apply to businesses, other legacy businesses that have been around for a while and have established cultures. Um, and for me, it's really understanding what the drivers of the culture are, um, that have gotten us to a point where we are today, and what parts of that culture we need to respect versus where we need to shift our thinking a little bit. And again, it gets back to this balance between sticking to what we're good at and thinking about, where the future is going. And the way that I like to think about it is, we've spent a lot of time over the last year, with our executive team, with our leadership team, to build out a scoreboard for what success looks like. And we've called them, in our case, the FOSS pillars. And there's 5 dimensions. There's the customer, there's the employee, there's the business, there's the future, and there's just operational success. And all of these are part of, our future growth plans. And so often we just focus on, the monthly P&L, so a profit and loss statement, or the financial metrics. But by allowing us to kind of clarify and define those pillars, we're kind of broadening the scope of what success looks like. And then from there, we can say, hey, listen, what does success look like for each of these pillars? And then taking it down the level and saying, hey, listen, if it's not just about today's profitability, if it's also about, community awareness, in a real and meaningful way, if it's also about employee engagement and retention, okay, what are these things that we can invest in, to really move the needle on that? And that starts to shift our time horizon, believe it or not, as you
Mm,
expand how you define success. We're finding that we're coming up with these things that both address issues today, but also set us up for success in the future. And so, I would just challenge people, that are out there, to say, hey, listen, how are we defining success? And is it only about the numbers? Are there other ways beyond the bottom line for us to say that we can create value into the future? That's kind of how we're thinking about it right now.
yeah, yeah. I love it. James, this has just been a really great conversation. I know at the time I need to let you go, but before we wrap up, I just wanted to give you a chance to share with the audience how they can connect with you, find out more about your work, your team. I know you just gave us a really great kind of final thought, but if there's any
Yeah.
other final word that you have, on the topic for today, and then we'll wrap up.
Yeah, I would say the best place to get a hold of me is on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/James Ricci. I would love to kind of connect with people who are thinking about, leadership, and specifically in the context of, legacy businesses, people who are thinking about entrepreneurship. We also like to pride ourselves on maybe evolved leadership practices, things that may seem a little bit out there. So I'm kind of trying to build more of a community of collaborators within that space. So LinkedIn would be a great spot. I'm also on Substack, under my own name as well. And so those are the best places to find me.
Wonderful. James, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. I encourage the audience to reach out, get connected, find out more about what James can do for you. Check out his LinkedIn, check out the company page, all the really cool stuff. Get connected. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the podcast. We hope you stay healthy and safe, and please join us again soon.